All new projects begin with the new project dialog, and so you can get to it a number of different ways. I can go to File, New Project. You can see that there's also a keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-N, and then finally you can get to it from the Start page. This is just loaded by default, gives you some links to other information. Most importantly, your recent files, or rather projects that you've had open. You can also click the New Project link to open up the New Project dialog. And so the new project dialog has several parts. You can see that on the left-hand side, there are categorizations of templates, whether by programming language or by product from Microsoft or the type of application that you want to build. In my case, I may want to drill down and build a Windows application that'll reduce the number of project templates that are available here. Project templates, as we'll see in just a moment, will give you a nice head start towards building your application. It's one of the big benefits to using Visual Studio rather than just using a code editor. You get all of this boilerplate code to get you started and point in the right direction. I choose the template that I want. I can see a description. I can change the name of the project as well as the solution itself, and I'll explain the difference between the two in just a moment. And then by default, it's going to put my new solution and project into my Documents folder. Your Documents folder is typically at C:/users/ whatever your username is /documents/ Visual Studio 2015 /projects. Mine happens to be mapped to my OneDrive so that it syncs up with the cloud. There are some other options here I'm going to ignore, and I'm going to click OK to create our new project. Now, like I said, even the most bare bones, basic project template is going to give you files and folders. It's going to give you boilerplate code. It's going to set some properties for the project that'll be useful in compilation. Some of these things are required. Some of these things are just guidance to help you get started building your application. It'll give you configuration files, kind of set that up for you. Here's an XML file that has configuration settings for a project. It will add some references to .NET assemblies created by Microsoft for that specific project type. And so there's a bunch of things that a project template will do for you. You can create your own project templates. It's kind of an advanced feature of Visual Studio, but let's continue on. The Solution Explorer is the window where you see all of the files and some of the virtual property settings and references that all belong to the project that will be compiled into a executable. And notice that the project here is kind of a child to this higher level concept of a solution. And so a solution can actually contain multiple projects, even if they're projects of different types. And so this is a convenient way to keep related projects together in the same solution. What do I mean by related projects? Why would you ever want to split up or have multiple projects inside of a single solution? Well, experienced developers might choose to split up a single application into several smaller projects for a number of different reasons. I can think of two right off the top of my head. The first one is that you might have different types of projects that all need the same core logic, business logic. So you have a web application and a Windows application. They need to share the same application logic, so you'll have now 3 different projects inside of your solution for that scenario. Or you might have a distributed application architecture, and so the different pieces of your application may need to sit on different servers, so you'd want to split up the logic into different projects so that they're all compiled in their own executables or DLLs that can be then distributed to those different computers in your architecture. So a solution is merely a container for groups of related projects, and a project is compiled into something that can be distributed to another computer depending on the type of project. So for example, a Windows application like we're building right here will be compiled into a .NET assembly with the file extension .exe. If I wanted to create a code library that could be shared across multiple projects, all it has is just code in it, but it's not really executable, then I would create a .NET assembly called a class library. It would be a file with the .dll file extension. To create compiled versions of your code, there's a couple of different ways to go about this. First of all, there are different configurations. There's a debug configuration and a release configuration by default. You can create additional configurations as well. The debug configuration is used whenever you're running the application in debug mode, which we'll talk about in a future lesson. The release, once you've got your application working and you're confident about it, you can then switch over to release mode and then create build the solution there. So let me build both of these configuration types, and you'll notice that when I build it, I'll get a build message here in this output window at the bottom. If you take a look now at in your Windows Explorer, let's go to our Documents folder, go to Visual Studio 2015 Projects, and then I think our application is called WPF Application 4. So I'm looking at the Solution folder here in my on my computer, under the Projects folder. So Documents, Visual Studio 2015 Projects, WPF Application 4. The Solution folder will contain the solution file, a .sln file, and that will contain references to all the projects that are in that umbrella, that solution. There's also a .vs folder that contains specific information that you don't want to edit regarding how Visual Studio will open up and treat your solution and your projects. And then there's also the project folder. Now the project folder and the solution folder happen to be named the same thing in this scenario, but they don't always have to be that way. In fact, it's probably better that they don't, especially in larger applications. If we open up the project folder, you'll see first of all that there's a csproj file, and that is a XML file that contains information about this project, the files that need to be compiled into the project, and essentially it's in a format, an XML format, with the schema for a tool called MS Build, which is Microsoft's configuration and build management tool. It orchestrates builds for, especially for larger projects. You can get in there and edit the way that projects are actually compiled. It's pretty advanced to do that, but it's certainly possible. And if we take a look, you'll see that there's almost a one-for-one correlation between what we see in the Solution Explorer and what we see over here in Windows Explorer. However, there are some notable differences. You don't see the csproj file. It's hidden because actually that's this node at the very top, this project node. And we can change information inside of the csproj by actually going to the properties window of this XML file, and we see we get this beautiful designer instead of having to deal with all the XML itself. And it gives us access to all the switches and the configuration options for a project. So that's one big benefit of using Visual Studio as opposed to just a code editor for that purpose. You'll also see that while we compare these files, there's a main window.xaml and an app.xaml here in our Solution Explorer, but we don't see app.xaml.cs or main window.xaml.cs. And that's because these are actually available, they're just rolled up. There's a parent-child relationship between the app.xaml and the app.xaml.cs for reasons that will become apparent whenever you study that particular API, WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, in another series. But at any rate, sometimes Solution Explorer will hide things from that are inside of the physical folder structure that you don't really need to see, or you need to see represented in a different way than you would see here, just as all flat files inside of in the project folder itself. Now you see that there's this bin and obj folder that you don't see referenced here in the Solution Explorer. The bin folder will contain the binary versions of your application according to the configurations that we saw a little bit earlier. So when we hit build solution with the given configuration, we created an executable version of our application that also contains some files that are necessary for Visual Studio to stay in sync with the execution of the actual application as it's currently running. The release version, although it has those files as well, it doesn't reference those files at all during execution. So you can just essentially copy that file onto somebody else's computer. As long as they're running the same version of the .NET framework, they'll be able to execute that application. The OBJ folder, you can see that it's also kind of split up between debug and release. These are contain the intermediate files, which are compiled into binary, but they haven't been linked yet. So all of these files are compiled based on the files that you see in the Solution Explorer, but they haven't all been combined into a single .exe or a single .dll just yet. And there's really nothing you need to do with the OBJ folder. You can actually delete OBJ and bin, and they'll be created for you again if you ever need to distribute your project to somebody else and you don't want to distribute so much code at one time. You can just delete some of those files and folders and then give it to somebody else in a zip format, and the file size will be smaller. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of common scenarios. What if somebody gives you a zip file containing a project? What should you do with it? You can honestly unzip it to any folder in your computer that you want to. You don't have to put it in your /documents/Visual Studio 2015/projects. I think it's convenient to keep it there, to keep everything kind of nicely together. However, you can put it at the root. You can put it anywhere you want to. Now, if you want to actually close down Visual Studio and then open it back up, you can just open up Visual Studio and then view one of the recently opened files, or you can also double click on the solution file. So let me do that real quick, try to dive in quickly here to our projects, our WPF application 4, and I'm just going to double click the solution file. It'll open up Visual Studio with our solution opened up into it. All right. And I think that's really all I want to talk about for now. There's a bunch of other features we could talk about, but I don't want to overwhelm you just yet. Let's continue on in the next video. We'll see you there. Thanks.